Oh, just a white balance test. That went well. Welcome back to Nameplates Explained, the series where I forfeit all rights to make my own decisions and leave it all in the hands of my audience. And here's the episode that you all voted on. Enjoy. Just one more quick thing before we begin. If you like this video and want to see more, please be sure to subscribe with the bell on, and if you missed last week's episode, you can watch it right up here. Let's begin. Midlands Today has been the BBC's regional news service for the West Midlands area since 1964. The Girls' Brigade is a Christian youth organisation that was first founded in 1893 by Margaret Little, that, as the name would imply, was basically the Boys' Brigade for girls. Originally known as the Girls' Brigade of Ireland, it was eventually merged with the similar organisations based in Scotland and England to become just the Girls' Brigade, and there are similar organisations today that exist in over 50 countries. Now, contrary to popular belief, this was not any kind of promotional tie-in to the Tom Cruise-led film franchise that began in 1996. Rather, it was related to Virgin Trains' commitment to the upgrade of the services and infrastructure on the West Coast Main Line when it took over the franchise in 1997, a mission that many described as impossible. The Eastern Daily Press is a regional newspaper for the county of Norfolk as well as parts of Suffolk and Cambridgeshire. As the name suggests, it was first founded in 1870 but didn't become known by its current name until 1872. Redwald ruled the Kingdom of East Anglia from 599 to 624 AD. Unfortunately, there isn't an awful lot of information out there regarding his life or his reign, because a lot of Anglian monasteries which kept a lot of the historic documentation were destroyed when the Vikings invaded. Founded by composer and talent agent Richard Doyley Cartier in the late 1870s, this light opera company was specifically designed to produce and stage the works of Gilbert and Sullivan. It was a surprisingly successful venture that started touring the UK and then eventually the world. However, rising production costs and difficulty in securing funding meant that it ceased operations in 1982. Chelmsford was a large town in Essex with an urban population of over 110,000 people. I say was because alongside St Asaph in Wales, it became the most recent recipient of city status in 2012 as part of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebration. The FT is a weekly publication first established in 1888 that specifically focused on business, finance and economic news. In England and Wales, the role of High Sheriff is a ceremonial office that was created in 1974 following various reforms to local government authorities. As for the duties of High Sheriff, they're more representational than active responsibilities, such as being present during royal visits or acting as returning officers during election times. Modern Railways is a monthly railway magazine that was first published in 1962. What made it so significant was its appeal to both amateur enthusiasts and railway professionals alike, given that it was an amalgamation of two separate publications for both of those groups. Roger Ford's a railway journalist and one of the most frequent contributors to the magazine. Josiah Stamp became chairman of the London Midland and Scottish Railway in 1926. LMS was notorious for infighting from the very beginning, so Stamp made it his personal mission to completely revamp the company for the purposes of bringing some degree of unity. One of his most prominent and effective practices was hiring in William Stanier from the Great Western Railway as chief mechanical engineer in 1932. Stanier's locomotives combined both power and efficiency, and with this and the service they provided, brought an end to many of the internal conflicts. John Betjeman was a writer, poet and broadcaster who served as the UK's Poet Laureate from 1972 until his death in 1984. One particular claim of his was writing and narrating the 1973 BBC documentary Metroland about the areas in London and Buckinghamshire that surrounded the Metropolitan Railway, what we now know as the Metropolitan Line on the London Underground. The Birmingham Royal Ballet is one of three major ballet companies in the UK and the only one currently based outside of London. It was originally based in London when it was first founded by Dame Ninette de Valois in 1946, originally known as the Sadler's Well Theatre Ballet Company. It didn't relocate to the city of Birmingham until 1990, which is how it got its current name, and it's still based there today. The East Anglian was the original name of the dedicated special express service that ran between Liverpool Street and Norwich. It first ran on the 27th of September 1937, and with only one intermediate stop at Ipswich, it could cover the total 115-mile journey in just 2 hours and 15 minutes. Nowadays, the fastest journey time between those two stops is only 90 minutes, though at present only two end-to-end services do do this a day. Royal Show was an exhibition and fair that was run by the Royal Agricultural Society of England between 1839 and 2009. The event brought together and celebrated the best of farming and rural life in England, with events such as the best in livestock to other activities, mostly in mud. Quite often in mud. I mean, it is the countryside after all. The Economist is an international weekly newspaper that was first published in 1843 that puts particular emphasis on international business, finance and political news. 275 was a standalone squadron in the Territorial Army that recruited almost specifically from the railway industry. Sadly, the unit was disbanded in 2014. Bressingham is a steam power museum located near the town of Diss in Norfolk. Among many other vehicles such as tractors and steamrollers, it's also the home to 3 narrow gauge railways and a whole host of steam trains. Another fun fact, it's also home to the Dad's Army collection, featuring many vintage vehicles that were used in the eponymous series. The Chartered Institute for Transport is an organisation that represents railways all over the world. As their initial operations expanded to overseas, it eventually merged with the Institute of Logistics and in 1999 became a singular entity. West Coast Rail 250 is a pressure group that campaigns for the improvement of services on the West Coast Main Line for the purposes of supporting business in the local areas. The 250 distinction likely comes from the failed Intercity 250 project of the early 1990s. Based in the town of Ipswich, the East Anglian Daily Times is the local newspaper for the counties of Suffolk as well as parts of Essex. It was founded in its current state in 1874 after absorbing another publication known as the Ipswich Express, which dates back to 1839. Since 1985, the European Union has presented several major EU cities that best represented the complexities and depth of European culture with the distinction of capital of culture. And the city of Glasgow received said distinction in the year of 1990. Fun fact, only 2 cities in the UK have ever received said distinction, the other one being Liverpool, who received it in 2008. The BTP is a special branch of the police force specifically to maintain law and order on the railways. It was formed upon the railways nationalisation in 1948 and currently has over 3,000 frontline officers all across the UK. The Law Society of England and Wales is a professional association that represents and supports solicitors through education, training and eventually employment. Known as the Ipswich Star since 2012, the Evening Star is a daily newspaper for the town of Ipswich. Its operations were merged with the previously mentioned East Anglian Daily Times in 2010 and now both are owned by the same company. The Liverpool Phil, short for Philharmonic, is a musical and orchestral society that was first founded in the eponymous city in 1840. This was named to commemorate its 150th anniversary in the year 1990, by which point it had already received an honorary fellowship from Liverpool John Moore University and the following year would be awarded the freedom of the city of Liverpool. On the 16th of November 1936, Tom Clark broke the world record for both the longest and fastest run by a steam train, completing the over 400-mile journey between London and Glasgow in just 5 hours and 53 minutes. However, the next day on the return leg, he beat that same record by 8 minutes. But the story doesn't end there. After breaking another speed record the following year, he took the Royal Train with King George VI and family in tow between Crewe and London. Upon arriving into London, the King summoned Tom from the footplate and awarded him an OBE on the spot for his achievements. Norfolk and Norwich Festival is an annual arts festival and one of the oldest of its kind in England. It's been held annually since 1824, though its origins actually go back to 1772 as an outgrowth of earlier arts fundraisers to support the construction of the original Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. As the name would suggest, this is the BBC region that covers the counties within the northwest of England, as well as parts of Yorkshire, Derbyshire and the Isle of Man. Nowadays, it is part of the larger BBC North Division operating out of Media City in Salford. The International Brigades were a set of parliamentary units set up to assist the existing Spanish Republic during the Spanish Civil War against the insurgent group led by General Francisco Franco. They were primarily supported in arms and military by the Soviet Union, in the same way that Franco's band of rebels were supported by the fascist regimes in Italy, Portugal and Nazi Germany. Franco ultimately defeated the Republic and took over control of Spain until his death in 1975. In roughly 1076 AD, the construction of Colchester Castle was ordered by Norman King William the Conqueror as his personal royal fortress. Due to the fact that it was built on the site of an ancient Roman temple, its keep is one of the largest of its kind in Britain. In later life, once the Normans fizzled out, it was abandoned and fell into disrepair before seeing later life as a prison. Most famously, witch hunter Matthew Hopkins would have those suspected of witchcraft imprisoned and interrogated interrogated within the castle's walls. Nowadays, you can visit the castle and learn more about the history of it, as well as the city of Colchester. Rail Express Systems was a sector of British Rail specifically for mail transportation. Originally, it was just part of British Rail until it was eventually rebranded as its own semi-entity in 1991. In 1996, upon the railways being fully privatised, it was abolished altogether and eventually purchased by EWS, now known as DB Cargo UK. The penny black was the world's first adhesive postage stamp ever circulated within a national postal system. First coming into use on the 6th of May 1840, it depicts a side profile of Queen Victoria against a black background and cost a comfortable 1 penny. Or £1.03 in today's money, which is actually quite a lot for a stamp when you consider the average price of a first class stamp today is just 76p. Multimodal is the act of transporting goods through more than one method of transport, such as both rail and road under the same contract. It's a practice that's fairly common among European rail operators such as DB Cargo UK, who operates this specific train. HMS Collingwood is a Royal Navy frigate based in Fareham near the city of Portsmouth and is the largest naval training organisation in the whole of Western Europe. It was first opened on the 10th of January 1940 and started training new recruits almost immediately for service in World War II. The base is still in operation and training new recruits today. Freight Connection was a series of 2 exhibitions held in the UK in 1992 and 1993. Organised in anticipation for the completion of the Channel Tunnel that would directly link England with France, it brought together various freight operators from different countries across Europe. In addition to this, 3 existing Class 90s, numbered 128 to 130, were painted into fictionalised interpretations of said European freight companies, as well as bearing the name Freight Connection in various languages, notably Dutch, German and French respectively. Allerton Traction and Rolling Stock Depot is located in Allerton, Liverpool and has serviced and maintained trains since the early 1960s. William McAlpine was a businessman and director of the Sir Robert McAlpine Construction Company that was founded by his great-grandfather. In 1973 he purchased the legendary Flying Scotsman after it suffered numerous failures on its trip to North America. He invested in repairs and restoration for the 23 years that he owned it. In that time, it went on another overseas trip, this time to Australia. McAlpine also built his own full-size private railway at his country estate in Folly Hill in Buckinghamshire. The ICE was first founded in 1818 in order to represent and support the profession of civil engineering, mostly through offering education, training and official qualifications to their members so that they could properly enter the field with the right skills. Crew Works was first opened in 1840 as a facility for building new trains once the railway started to expand in the mid-19th century. They've built all manner of locomotives, steam, diesel and electric, including the Class 90. Since 2001, the facility has been owned by Bombardier. The Railway Children is a charitable organisation that has successfully helped over 300,000 homeless children across the UK, Africa and India since 1996. Based in Manchester, Cerestar is a wheat and starch producing company whom started out as the Nichols and Nagel Company back in 1911. In 1987, it was acquired by the Italian Ferruzzi Group and was known by this name until it was acquired by the American Cargill Corporation in 2002. On the 8th of August 1963, 62-year-old driver Jack Mills took over a mail train at Crewe bound for London. When he was south of Leighton Buzzard, he was stopped at a red signal at around 3 AM, at which point a group of men entered his cab and proceeded to attack him. They ordered him to drive half a mile up the line to a nearby road bridge, where they then turned their attention to the train's cargo. This incident would eventually become known as the Great Train Robbery. This is in reference to the Ford car production plant based in the town of Dagenham, East London. It opened in 1931, but it wasn't until after the Second World War that it truly hit its stride, making such iconic models as the Cortina, the Capri and the Fiesta. By the time it ceased car production in 2002, it had produced over 10 million cars. Today the factory is still in business, though now only builds and fits diesel engines for their cars. The Railway Mission is a Christian mission specifically for the railway industry. It was founded in 1881, but it wasn't until the early 20th century that they started the National Rail Chaplaincy Service, built in constructed mission halls at railway stations. When the line from Moss End to Coatbridge was electrified in 1981, British Rail built a new container freight terminal on the site of an existing siding that had been there since 1959. This helped relieve Moss End of potential overcrowding and allowed more electric freight trains to run to Scotland. The yard has been owned and used by Freightliner Group since 1995 and it is still in use today. However, there have been concerns as recently as February of this year that the plant may close at some point in the future due to drops in demand. And that was another episode of Nameplates Explained. If you want to vote on next week's train, you can either do so up there or on my Instagram pages. Please note the voting will only last for 24 hours to allow me time to do the research and other work needed to get the episode out next week. Another quick reminder, if you like this episode and you want to see more, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to know when I upload a video. If you missed last week's video and you want to watch it, you can do so by clicking up there. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and remember that in these difficult times, it's important to stay safe, stay sensible, and stay at home. See you next week.